we're going to get started. So as we have up here on the screen, we like to start our sessions with a quote to kind of set the tone for today. So today's quote is from Steve Krug, and it says, "Accessible design is a good design." So today we're going to be talking about what the term shift left means, how it can be applied to your accessibility journey, and talk about some principles of universal design. So thank you for joining us today for MagicA11y Live. This is an event that we host about every month where we talk about one specific accessibility topic and share our information and take a deep dive into it to help spread the word on accessibility. We are really appreciative of those of you who have joined us in the past and have decided to come back. And for those of you, this is your first time, welcome. My name is Erin Evans. I'm our Director of Accessibility here at Magic, and I have some of my wonderful colleagues, Tarveen Kaur and Anjali Lawani. Tarveen?
Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining our MagicA11y Live session, and trust me, it will be a fantastic session where you will see the ROI when we talk about shift left in the mindset in the product development life cycle. So thank you all for joining.
Hi, I'm Anjali Lawani. I'm an accessibility consultant at Magic. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to join us. We really appreciate it.
So before we get started, I want to throw out a couple of housekeeping items. First, if you do need them, the closed captions are enabled in the Zoom. To see them, please select the closed caption button on your screen. Secondly, please use the Q&A box for questions. We will address them as we go, or at the end, we have time set aside specifically for questions and answers. So if you can please pop those into the Q&A box, that would be great. All right, Arpit, I think we're ready to go. So because it's spring here in the Northern Hemisphere, we're going to start with our Moodometer. What is your favorite part of this season? You can choose however many you want. Warmer weather, longer days, flowers blooming, or allergies. Tarveen, I see you smiling. Let's see what those answers are. Most of you like the longer days and the warmer weather. A few of you like your seasonal allergies, so hey, let's go with it. I know for me, the sneezing is kind of frustrating all day, but it is what it is. So let's talk about our agenda for the day. So we are going to first start with a typical product development lifecycle, and we're going to talk about and define what is shift left. We're going to talk through the principles of universal design, wireframes and annotated designs, what they are, how to use them, and some other information to consider before you start doing a full build. So our next poll, when do you and your teams currently test for accessibility? There's no wrong answer here, just to be clear. Plan, design, build, launch, maintain, or never. Most of you guys are doing your testing in the early stages, which is good to hear. The plan, design, and build stages, and it's okay if you're not doing it that early in the phase. At least we have a sense of who's here and who's doing what. So let's move forward into the product development lifecycle.
Alrighty, so what we're looking at here is a typical product development lifecycle. What we're showing you is just general. We understand that this isn't inclusive of all best practices and steps, but this is just a general framework for us to kind of talk through it. So typically at the beginning of the life cycle, you have your strategy and planning phase, and this is where you try to understand what your customer needs are and kind of define what you're going to build. Then you'll move on to the analysis, design, and preparation phase. And this is how you're going to build it, what's it going to look like, and how it's going to work for your users. And then you move into the implementation and remediation phase. And this is the execution of your build, where you're actually going to do the work and pull it all together and kind of see how it's going to happen. And then you go into your testing and audit phase. And this is actually where you go and you typically will find the bugs and kind of the gaps that you're seeing within your product and where your users are having barriers with that. And then you go into your compliance and conformance phase. And this is fixing those bugs to align with WCAG or whatever other standards you're looking to align with.
Thank you, Anjali. So the next slide talks about what is shift left and why are we recommending this change. So shift left is actually, as Anjali already covered, that we have seen everyone performing the design review or the testing, actual testing in the testing and audit phase. Whereas the reason we are recommending shift left is that ensure that your design is being reviewed early in the cycle, especially in the design phase. Now, what needs to be done will be covered in the upcoming slide, but yes, we recommend, and that's the best approach to be followed to make your product more compliant, reduce your cycle, be like time to market will be very less, and your overall product quality will be fantastic because most of the items are being taken care early in the cycle and will gonna save a lot of dollar. And having this, please ensure that people with disabilities are also being involved during the design review. How and what needs to be done in this phase while performing the audits and the review will be taken care in the upcoming slides. So moving on to the next slide.
So shift left is an important thing because it is a place where by doing it, you can start finding your errors earlier. And there have been some studies that show that a lot of accessibility errors happen in the design phase. So you can prevent some of the rework that has typically been happening by looking at your designs before you implement the build to make sure your colors are correct, your headers are labeled, other issues that typically come up. We'll talk again more about those as we move forward. But this is a place where if you do the work earlier in the phase, you'll be able to reduce the amount of rework that's coming. It's also important to understand that this is a great time to bring your teams together on accessibility, because as we've talked about many times before, accessibility doesn't belong to just one person. So when you start involving different team members earlier in the conversation, you as an advocate are also then increasing awareness around accessibility as you're going through each stage of the product development lifecycle. It's also a good place to start doing more user testing. When you're in the design phase, you can start talking to different users and asking, how is this going to work for you? What do you think about this? And by embedding that user testing and user feedback earlier in the system and earlier in the game, you're not waiting until the end to find out where something may not be working as you intended. It also, at the end of the day, it's building accessibility into your product, right? And that's one of the things that we have been discussing as a really big, important part of the accessibility journey, is making sure you take the time to put in this effort up front to, again, reduce the amount of effort you're putting in when things are already done and then you find out there might be some gaps.
Absolutely, I agree to whatever you have shared, Erin, and it is important because it is the right stage and the right place where we need to do it. Okay, moving on to the next slide. We have a poll question.
We have a poll. Where can you find the best information on different design principles? Choose one of them. Web Area, WCAG, Universal Design, the National User Testing Consortium. WCAG and Universal Design were the two top winners of the poll. So the best place is probably both WCAG, but also Universal Design Principles. So go to the next slide, Anjali.
Alrighty. So there are 7 principles to universal design. We'll take a deeper dive into what they're all about in the next slide, but just to lay them out for you. So the first one is equitable use. The second one is flexibility in use. The third is simple and intuitive use. The fourth is perceivable information. The fifth is tolerance for error. The sixth is low physical effort. And the seventh is size and space for approach and use.
So as we go through, can you go back real quick? As we go through these next few slides, I just want to call out that the definitions that we have on screen are almost verbatim from the Interaction Design Foundation. So that's where this information is coming from. So now we can go forward. Thank you. So let's talk about equitable use. So equitable use is designing for all learners, right? It's something that we might be thinking about as kind of like an obvious thing, but it is one of the core principles, and it's providing the same means of use for all users and trying to avoid leaving anybody out. And you want to make the design appealing to everyone. So the image that we have here on the screen kind of shows different ways to consider this in an iconographic way. So we have the audio description, inclusion of closed captioning, braille, assistive listening, making sure your color contrast is there. So what this is representing is showing how these different ways to use the material are embedded into a design. If you think about equitable use from a physical environment, a great thing that I think about often are scissors. My son is left-handed, so I know he struggles with scissors that typically are made for right-handed people. So when he flips to the left-handed scissors, they make it easier for him to use. And that's just one way where these design principles apply across physical environment as well as the digital environment. So we want to try to explain different uses just as for understanding, but when you're thinking about it, when we're talking web design or product design, this is where the inclusion of different ways for all users to get to that information is inclusive of equitable use.
Thank you, Erin. Moving to the next one, that is flexibility in use. Now, when we say flexibility in use, we need to ensure that we have an alternative mechanism to access any given information. As Erin already covered on the left-handed and right-handed, and I know how people struggle if the menu items are being defined at a defined place. And the reason we have added a few of the pointers in the image on the right side is to highlight the basic needs for flexibility in use for any type of disability, whether it's hearing impairment or visual impairment or left or right-handed differentiation between the people using the product. So volume control is again a mandatory thing. For low vision user, try ensuring that you have large prints as an option available and accessible print. There should be a speed control. We should have time adjustment for people with different abilities. We should allow the magnifiers for low vision user. The color accommodations, I really liked one of the platform where there were different color schemes available for people with different color blind disability. So how well that feature is being integrated and how efficient it was, and how the partner ensured that it is flexible in use for any type of color disability. Otherwise, we have seen people only covering about red color as a core disability in the colorblind, but covering all makes complete sense and is a better example to be taken care of. And the last one is for sure left and right-handed UI controls. And as Erin said, talked about scissors, I have also seen the sharpeners that people end up using and how efficient. And I also looked at the videos people share that they really loved a small change that is being done to cater to their needs.
Yeah, I have a coffee pot that has it opens from right to left, and I'm right-handed, so it's not a problem, but I know that I have seen in the reviews that left-handed users struggle with it because it's not their natural way, and they said it should open from front to back. So just, some of those random things to think about as we're considering what are the principles of universal design. So we'll move forward into simple and intuitive use. So this is really about trying to reduce the complexity or cognitive overloads. And you can, as you're thinking about how this applies to the WCAG guidelines and the information that you want to make sure that things are not too much information on the page at once. This is trying to eliminate those unnecessary complexities, keeping things in a logical place, consistent use throughout a web page. The image on the right talks about logical and consistent structure, correct labels and tagging, making sure that there's not a lot of hindrance or things that are in the beginning, and a predictable look and feel. And all of these elements are ways that you can help to provide a good, simple way for users to not have to be confused by what's happening so that they can get through the work that's being done.
Thank you, Erin. Moving on to the next one, that is perceptible information. The important note to be taken care for this is to ensure that any information that is being perceived is regardless of user sensory abilities. For example, a website should have a clear and legible text, as well as options for audio and video cues to accommodate user with different sensory preferences. Video should have captions and audio descriptions to ensure that they are accessible to people with hearing or vision impairment. And as you see, the image on the right, it covers almost everything that I have talked about. In addition, we should ensure the high contrast is being covered. You should have the keyboard access and the alternative text provided to people with different abilities, and ensure every information is perceived the way you have designed it. Moving on to the next one.
So tolerance for error. This one always makes me chuckle. I don't know why, but it's like, it's almost saying, oh, go ahead, make an error. But it's actually quite the opposite, because we all know that people make mistakes, totally normal. So tolerance for error is trying to prevent those errors, and building that in early on can help to make things less difficult as you go forward. So in this universal design principle, it is about trying to find ways to make sure that what a user is doing is their intended use. So the image we have on the right is something you would typically see from a web page, or if you're on your computer. Are you sure you want to delete this file? Yes, I'm really sure. No, I'm really not sure. So this is these additional stop gaps are there to make sure that what you as a user are doing is what you're intending to do, and it's helping to prevent errors as you go through.
Absolutely. And I just wanted to add one more thing here. As per WCAG also, it states that don't bind a single key. For example, delete, don't bind D to the delete action. Just ensure the shift or control or some combination is being used, so that by mistake user don't end up doing the error he doesn't intend it to, and there should be a tolerance to error. He should have an option to redo or undo whatever action has been performed. Low physical effort, we just need to ensure that we don't end up consuming a lot of strength and effort for the user while performing any of the given tasks, whether it's a small task or even playing a game. Just ensure that the keyboard shortcuts are being provided, ensure the right fonts are being used, have less dependency on mouse, like click, click, click needs to be avoided. Adequate color contrast to reduce the eye strain is what you need to ensure, and please ensure it is easy to navigate and traverse. That's the key motive of low physical effort. And we shouldn't have the repetitive actions to reach at a place where you want user to move. So be consistent, be concise, and very clear in anything that you design or develop.
When you're thinking about low physical effort, as we're talking through the shift left mentality, and this is a great place where you're thinking about your design and your user flow. And as Tarveen said, you know, the click, 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 how many steps does it take to get to the next thing? Or For those of us who are old enough to remember the Tootsie Pop commercial, how many licks does it take to get to the middle of a Tootsie Pop, right? You want to try to do something in a way that you can achieve the goal with as few steps as possible, and make sure from a digital environment that you're not requiring people to be moving all over the place in order to get through something in your tasks. The last of the 7 principles is size and space approach for use. So this is thinking about multiple devices in different environments, providing a clear line of sight, making sure all of the elements are easy to get to. If you're looking at the image on the right-hand side, we're talking about being able to adjust the size and spacing of elements, right? Thinking about your target spacing and making sure the target for a clickable area is big enough for people to be able to use it, even if they might have mobility issues, or if they're using something like Dragon Naturally Speaking, whatever they need to do, it's not so small. And making sure there's sufficient white space in your design, because if there's too much stuff all cluttered together, it really does make it more challenging for people to figure out where they're supposed to be. If you're thinking about this in a physical environment, we'll go back to kiosks or ATMs at a bank on the sidewalk. You want to make sure that users can navigate to that ATM, that they can comfortably use all of the buttons that they can without having to stand up or without being blocked by barriers that might be in the way. So just really thinking about how people are getting to your product is something that's important here. So our last poll is, in which part of the design phase should you test for accessibility? In your design system, in your wireframes, in your final design, or all of the above? All of the above, which is the correct answer because they're all right. And we're going to talk through what these different things are as we go through the next few slides. So Anjali, do you want to talk to us about design systems? Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry, my bad. So use design systems, it's a set of standards to help us manage and design at scale. So that you can kind of make a plan and then design all of those things a little bit more quickly. This will help save your organization some time and some money. It'll improve your overall accessibility, and it will increase your consistency throughout your products and the accessibility throughout your products.
So on the screen, you see a picture of some Legos. So one way to think about design systems is that they are individual bricks or pieces of a Lego system that when you put it together, it builds something really cool. So by using a design system, you have different components that are your building blocks that you can pick and pull and put together. And if you're doing the shift left mentality, auditing your design systems up front, looking at the accessibility of those design systems in each individual component, then as you start to pull those together, because you already know each component has had some accessibility reviews and some considerations, as you pull them together, you're going to have a more accessible product as you go. Tarveen, is there anything you want to add on that?
No, I think it is beautifully covered, and in any ways in the upcoming slides we'll be talking more about what and how needs to be done. Thank you. Moving on to the next one, that is use of wireframes. This is a very important place where we actually do the design review. It is not the design, but a blueprint. We end up reviewing the designs, and considering you would have both the layouts if your application is being built in horizontal and vertical mode, or it is mobile application. So you end up testing all the possible designs that will go into the application. And what we end up doing on these is validating many of the key success criteria and the UDL guidelines that we have talked about. How that needs to be done is it helps you communicate really well between the different teams. The development team has prior notifications on what and how needs to happen if you involve accessibility review in the design phase, and design team changes all the required ease of use and all the 7 principles that we have discussed and ensure the right thing is being built instead of going back and redesigning everything.
Another part of the build phase or the design phase where including thoughts on accessibility is when you're doing the actual colorful elements of the design. So designs are always built before we start doing the build, right? It's really important to use some tools such as a Figma or Envision or Sketch, which are collaborative tools where you can have your colorful designs based on your wireframes, based on what your product is. And in this phase, this is a place where you and your design teams can sit and work, and you can have more detailed feedback on how things are looking, how things are working. Some of these different products, you can do different screens. So the screenshot we have here on the right is from MagicBox, which is our platform, and some of the redesign that's happening with that. And this is a small screenshot, but you can see that there are some dark purple buttons, and all of the buttons have the same components. So if you go back to that concept of the design systems, right? Like that's the place we're calling it. But when you first look at this, maybe that color contrast isn't quite right. So this is a place where you can test those things, make sure you have the right codes that you're going to want. You can leave a comment in here. It's very much like an Adobe product where you just leave comments and notes. And these are places for you to collaborate with your team members, continue to do the iteration of how does this design work? Consider your user flows as you're going through. See how a calendar, is it going to be a pop up and cover something, or are you planning for it to pop open on the side? Those are some of the types of things that you can do through these tools. And as you're building those design elements, you can be looking for accessibility barriers as you go. It's a real-time collaboration element, and it really does help to get some of the issues out of the way. So by the time all of this is ready to go to the build team, a lot of the pieces have been commented on, considered, talked through, and now you're ready to build.
Thank you so much, Erin. Moving on to the main key point, what needs to be considered during this phase, especially where we have said that do all of these items at the right place. Ensure the headings are being defined. Your dev team is well aware of the headings. What is the structure? How this needs to be placed. Ensure the color contrast for content, images, and graphic is being validated, because that's the place where colors are being freezed. And that's the same UI and design that will be used across your product during the development phase. So consider that everything is being done and you are performing the audit late in the cycle and doing the color contrast testing and sending back again to the dev. And now we struggle that, oh, this design and the color scheme that we have used needs to be fixed across 100 different places. How difficult and how cost consuming and how it will impact your overall schedule. So that's the reason. Please ensure that color contrast is being tested in the place where we have highlighted and raised that it is the shift left. This is where you need to involve people with disabilities for your review. The next one is appropriate font size and type for readability. All the links and buttons, how they need to be defined, what should be the disabled state, what should be the active state, what should be the visible focus, what should be the color contrast of the focus visible when you traverse to the buttons and links. All of that can be tested in design phase. Required alt text, please ensure that you highlight, yes, these are the decorative images, these are the logos, can be made as an exception, but rest all needs to be done perfectly basis our vocab principles. the form labels to be defined properly. All the multimedia content that you are designing should have the options like captions, transcripts, audio descriptions, speed control, and all of the other stuff. So ensure that all the recommendation from the feature and functionality standpoint, ensuring all the accessibility needs are being met, are being highlighted at this stage. Keyboard accessibility, ensure that, considering you are not doing the actual testing using screen reader, but you can traverse through the interactive elements using the keyboard, so just do the keyboard navigation during this phase. And also just talk about compatibility, because you would be aware of this product will work on mobile as well. So ensure the design that is being built, how the structure is being built, how the menu items are being laid, all of that is being reviewed from a design standpoint and from the accessibility and usability standpoint. This will gonna help us and build up accessibility and a compliant product in a very effective and efficient way, and will help you build up a product with a lesser dollar to what you have actually estimated for.
Yeah, and one thing I want to add is it definitely will help, but as with everything in life, it doesn't mean everything's going to be perfect, right? And even if you start implementing these in phases, right? Maybe as you're building your new products, you focus on a couple of these main elements, or it's too much to do it all at once. You know, we go back to the idea of every little step helps. And the more that we can be talking about, thinking about, testing for, looking into how to make compliant elements earlier in the cycle, the better that your product will be as you build it. But you always want, you know, there's always going to be something. I've worked with technology long enough that we always know that there's going to be something, but these are just some ways to help pull in accessibility so that it's part of how you do things, and it will become a part of your process instead of an additional thing that you're looking for as you go through. So before we get to the question and answers for specifically today, we do want to invite everybody to join us back here on Global Accessibility Awareness Day, which is Thursday, May 18th. We will be doing another MagicA11y live session at 11 a.m. about strategies for growing an organizational accessibility practice. When this deck comes out to you, the link here will take you to that registration, and we'll also be posting about it. But we're really excited about it. GAD is a pretty fun day for all of us. So if you're available, we'd love to have you join us. Which leads us into our Q&A for today. Anjali, you're still on mute.
Oh man. If you have any questions, please go ahead and you can drop them in the question and answer box. We did get one earlier, so I'll read that. I'm so sorry if I butcher the pronunciation of this name, but from Sylvana, she asked, could you please talk or recommend materials about accessibility considerations for localization? Thanks.
So when we talk about localized content, first of all, we need to understand and make our dev team aware of that they need to use a very important guideline, that is language of parts, and ensure that your page language is defined and the language of parts on the specific content that is being localized, if that's like different to what your page language is, that should be well defined. And from a design standpoint, one key pointer that needs to be taken care is the size of the buttons and size of the text area, because when you have an option to move or change the language from one language to another, what we end up seeing that the content on the buttons or the content on the images, if it's not images of text, end up gets overlapping to the UI or gets truncated because of the design. So ensure that you understand what is the size, what needs to be formatted once it changes from one localized language to another. So I think these are the key parameters that gets impacted whenever you test or review or build a product for a localized content. Erin, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think that's a really good definition and explanation. And as you're talking, I'm thinking of some of the products. I'm just thinking specifically of Spanish, where we know it's about a third longer when we do the translation. So if you do know that you're going to be building your product or that you're going to have it available in that other language, you might want to design with the longest language, whether that's Spanish or something else, so that you can, as Tarveen said, you know where the size of the button is going to be an issue, or where you might want to make sure you have accommodated your smallest available font size within the legibility parameters. That's a really good question. Thank you so much for that question.
We are waiting for more questions. Anyone has any questions, any feedback, anything that you want to discuss?
Maybe we talked too fast today.
Seems like.
All right, we have one from Amy. We're currently building out our design system. I'm creating usage guides for each component. I've been including an accessibility section for each. The information is based on research and existing standards in design systems like Google's Material and other established systems. Are there certain guidelines that should be addressed for every component for consistency?
That's a really great question. I like the hard questions today. So always make sure that you're keeping the web content accessibility guidelines as a part of the thought that you're doing, especially if this is going to be a digital build. Another really good resource out there, Microsoft has just recently updated their inclusive design systems information. And while those aren't necessarily standard formula guidelines, they still have a lot of really good information. And I would also say, make sure that you're thinking about your user flow, right? When you're looking through what you have in that accessibility section, making sure that as you're building it specific to your users, if there's anything that you want to make sure you add in there, I would add that as well. Parveen, is there anything else you would like to add to that?
No, I think this is covered, and Emmy, I think that's the right way that you are doing. We just need to ensure that, and the one thing that helps during the design, considering you are building and creating all the possible systems and the material, the one thing that has helped us in our workflow is ensuring that we share the live examples, like working examples of compliant component that you want your team to build, because that's a reference point for them, and that will bring ease, and it will avoid a lot of to and fro while building up the product.
Yeah, the W3C has a lot of really good examples if you get stuck. That's where I go a lot. So.
All right. Thank you so much for that, ladies. Our next question is from Rebecca, and she said, can you talk about implementing accessibility in digital documents, PDFs, Word, PPT, etc.?
Sure. So I'll take it up. So Rebecca, what we'll do is, we have already presented a similar series specifically about PDFs, and we have talked about PDFs like very thorough and detailed. What we can do is we can send across that recording to you and you can go through it, but I'll still like to answer how to implement. The best way is to templatize the content that you want to create, whether it's PDF, Word, or PPTs. I know that PDF has its own complexity and nuances associated to it, but yes, if we streamline the process, templatize your InDesigns if it's the base input that you have for PDFs, and same goes for PPT. If you templatize your PPT, you can generate nth amount of outcomes. But yes, few steps from accessibility standpoint needs to be done once the output is being generated. And the inbuilt tools just play and help you with 10% of the gaps that can be encountered upfront, but the rest of the testing needs to be managed in each of the template that you create.
All right. Thank you so much for that, Tarveen. And I did drop in the chat box a YouTube link to our PDF session if you'd like to go and check that out. Our next question is from Anonymous, and they asked, should design and development accessibility guidelines be kept separate, or is it best to keep them together?
That is a loaded question, and I'm going to go with it depends. So the reason I say that is because design and development, the accessibility crosses everything, right? So I think when I say it depends on exactly what part of your guidelines are you thinking about. From a development standpoint, you want to make sure that your developers understand how to implement the technical coding for making sure things are built to be accessible. Your design elements, you want to make sure that those elements are put together, that it says, you have put directions on, let's say, your color codes that you want or implementation standards, but you want to make sure that you are cohesive and you're collaborating in those guidelines. I also know in the design process and in the development process, there are things that are very specific to just those two things. So when you're talking about should you keep them together or separate, the answer is yes. But I think it's really important to think about are you doing that overlap? And if you aren't sure, then I would say keep them together and get feedback from your users, get feedback from your teams on your design team and your development team. Tarveen, do you have any additional thoughts with that?
No, I think this is being covered, Erin. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks for that, Erin. Annie asked, any tips for teams who want to start gathering feedback from people with disabilities who use different types of assistive technology in terms of recruitment?
Yes, so I would like to answer this. So how and what is the process that should be followed when you involve people with disabilities? Firstly, we need to understand if your product is non-compliant, then you need to provide the required support. That's the reason we say ensure your product is accessible. So try involving and giving them the sufficient support that while they are traversing, they are sharing their feedback. This is what I'm traversing to. But what happens if something is completely blocked or is not accessible? That should be defined and detailed out to them so that they can provide all the required feedback to you. And please ensure that different type of disabilities are being involved during your review process. And what we do is we gather all the inputs that they provide, and basis the input, we try to formalize them in the form of bug report and then circulate it across. And trust me, real user feedback makes a huge impact on whatever we do and deliver.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tarveen. All right. So Deneb asked, if clients are very attached to their light brand colors that would not provide enough contrast with white, what are some good places to incorporate these colors to give them importance in the design without ruining the required contrast ratios? You can't use them with links, for example, or buttons that use white text, but where can you use them?
So, and can I take it up? Okay, so the best alternative, if this is the case, and that's what we have usually seen, for example, if you talk about copyright, you end up seeing copyright on many of the instances where it is being grayed out or not visible, or it is not passing or meeting the compliance. The best recommended approach is to add the boundary line with a specific color that matches to each and every instance. For example, if it's a black content, use a white boundary color. If it's white, use the black boundary color. That's would enable you not changing the colors as per the color screen, but meeting the compliance with the alternative mechanism to ensure, yes, the required content is visible to the people with visual impairment.
All right. Thanks, Tarveen. Another anonymous attendee asked, do you know of any resources that explain the different types of tests that can be done at each stage further? Wireframes, designs, planning.
I don't have any off the top of my head, but I can certainly do some research and we can share out some links specific to more detailed information on each of those phases. The few tools that we talked about, I know are really good tools, but I will find information and we'll share it out. We'll add it into this recording information since we don't know who you are. but we'll find it for sure.
Thank you, Erin. Garvit asked, the answer for best color palette for people with color blindness always differs. According to you guys, which color palette is the best considering there are different types of color blindness?
I don't know that there is one best. I think it depends on what your company is looking for, and just making sure there are different tools, different extensions you can download where you can test the different color blindness combinations. I don't have there's the blue yellow, there's the all of the blues, and there's the red green. So you can, I would say, go with what your company, your design palette is. Make sure that the colors within your palette are meeting the guidelines, and then test them against those different extensions and see what ones you like. There's no right or wrong as far as which is the best.
All right, awesome. Thanks, Erin. And another question from Anonymous. Any tips for building a framework for an organization just starting to get everyone educated on what is accessibility, why it matters, and getting at least one accessibility champion in each team across the organization?
Yes, May 18th at 11 a.m. Please join us. That will be where we're going to very much discuss this. And I'm not trying to be super sarcastic, but that is a big topic. And that is why we want to share that in an hour-long format on Global Accessibility Awareness Day. In order to get you started, the first thing is exactly what you're doing right now. Find resources that are available online, start getting information, start looking for ways to understand, what are we talking about? What does it mean to include alt text on an image? How do I include alt text on an image? One phrase that I often use is you have to eat the elephant one bite at a time. Including a framework, building a framework for an organization takes a lot of time. It's a big elephant. So you want to start somewhere, and you're already starting somewhere. So my recommendation is stay involved, get connected on social media with groups like on LinkedIn. There's a meetup, the Alley meetup group. There's a lot of great resources out there. And honestly, if you are able to attend our session in a couple of weeks, that is exactly what we're going to be talking about, and how to build up that organizational framework so that more than one person is your accessibility champion at your company.
All right. Thanks so much for that, Erin. Those are all of the questions that we have for right now. We do have another 10 minutes, so we'll give everyone another minute in case there's anything else that you guys think of.
This is another time for some interpretive dance or music.
But thank you. These were really great questions, and hope we were able to answer all of your questions. And in case you have any query, anytime you can email us, and we're happy to support.
And if you didn't see it in the chat, Mark put in a website, color.nerdery.com.
There are many such sites, Erin, that talks about different type of colorblind impairment, protanopia, deuteranopia, and that's how we validate the information and the images. So you can upload the image and it can highlight where all it is failing and what needs to be done. So these kind of tools really help. So thank you so much, Mark.
All righty, it seems like those are all of our questions. So I think that we will call this the end of the session, but thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Again, just a quick reminder about our Global Accessibility Awareness Day session that is linked here and will also be linked in the deck for you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks
everyone.
Thank you. Bye.